So I won't. So in the area of consumption, there's groups working on lifestyles, voluntary simplicity, education, consumer action, ethical shopping. We know these. On the production side, industrial ecology, extended producer responsibility. You've seen all this. You know all this. And this side, then there's also the area of distribution in between and investment. Now, of course, the Rio Plus 20 is going to be definitely focusing on this particular area for those who do have access to resources. What are you going to do with it? And values, addressing those. So, throughout the world, this is like a little snapshot of the different kinds of approaches. You've seen these, a lot of times they're in lists. But the thing about that is that each one of these practices has people involved in doing them. And within that, they form networks, and they form communities. And actually, in a lot of ways, a lot of them are like subcultures. They have their own language, jargon, that they talk to each other in, their friendships, organizations, publications. They're like different cultures. And they don't necessarily all talk the same language. They don't talk the same language as at the UN level. They may not say SCP or major groups, or they have different terms for things. And it's important to respect that and to approach it that way. Now, on these programs, back in 2007 at this Civil Society NGO Forum at the International Experts Meeting, a lot of the NGOs were saying, well, what kind of programs would be good that should be promoted? And we came up with a number of the kinds of things we've been hearing for years. These groups need financing. Okay, why not a program? You get all the World Bank and the GEF, and you get the donor agencies together and say, okay, create a program, brainstorm, think about how to fund these essential programs. If this is so important, how are we going to fund it? We need help with that. Have a symposium, write a report on it, do some workshops, teach us how to do it, but help us figure out how to fund these different kinds of projects. That would be one. Mapping the movement. We want to know who else is doing what around. Are we just reinventing the wheel? We all talk about different best practices. We don't want exceptions to the rule. We want to know who's out there and who makes up this movement, which is always changing. Trend analysis. One of the points we realize is that in terms of the America's Process 10-year framework, the whole point of that is to reverse these trends. That has to be the goal of all this. So we're talking about 10-year framework. Okay, within that 10 years, how much of that can we reverse? That should be our goal. And so we need to understand these trends so we can evaluate, we can monitor and evaluate whether we're successful in moving towards that. And of course, indicators and measures, there's lots of work being done on that. But in terms of this 10-year framework or program, can we pull it together into a program that draws on all the work and expertise and knowledge that's out there to connect it up so it can support this movement? And the research, dialogue, stakeholder, and it isn't like this isn't being done. Of course, a lot of us are engaged in this work. The question is, are we coordinated? Are we coordinated enough? Because we need to be more effective, obviously. So, and the UN is a great place to tie things together and help us make those connections and help us do a better job. Because it's really not about asking the UN to do it for us. It's about the UN is a vehicle that we're all engaged with. We have to help each other. It's about mutual support. So each of these programs then connect up to the others. Of course, with financing, everybody else who has these programs who want to know how to finance that work, dialogues and communicating, education and research. And they talk about this, we've talked about this framework over the last 8 years. Well, okay, the framework has to have some kind of relationship with country, regional governments. Are they going to be, what role are they going to play? Could they, in any of these programs? All the different major groups and agencies and all, and maybe you need some kind of coordinating group that helps us, all these programs connect each other so that they work together rather than these little silos. So here's a 10-year framework. Put it in a 10-year framework of reversing trends, and there's our little contribution to thinking about this and talking about it. Ultimately, it gets back to the actual groups who are doing this work. You're probably every one of you here is doing some aspect of this. So, what would this 10-year program look like? What kind of programs do you need to make your work more effective? So, this is in our little report here. So hopefully that made more sense. Over the coming year, we want to explore that. We want to explore that with you. If you have some ideas, you want to work together. Join us and help us move this forward. Thank you.
We've gone far enough, so maybe it's time to get a little bit more intimate, and I would ask you if it's possible to lower the lights.
You can ask.
Seriously.
I'm also asking that we turn off the air conditioning.
Well, this is mainly because I must warn you that my presentation is not very institutional, and I'm basically working with pictures, so that's the reason why. As you probably know, Consumers International is a federation of consumer organizations. This means that we are a movement based on local organizations that work throughout the world. And we've been engaged in dealing with the protection of consumer rights for a long time, since the 1960s. And also for a long time we've been engaged with sustainable consumption and engaging as well our organizations in the different, my English words are just running away from me, in the different aspects of sustainable consumption. And I would like you now to sort of jump into a photograph which I think expresses the heart of my presentation, and it has a lot to do with what Tim Jackson was mentioning in terms of justice and fairness. I think this is a fantastic documentary essay by a photographer, an Italian photographer called Dario Mataveri, and it's called The Children of Bombay, the Street Children of Bombay. And it definitely expresses what we're all thinking when we're thinking of fairness and justice. And it also expresses all of our contradictions, and it expresses also the complexities underlying most of the problems that we're facing. But the question is, how did we get here? Because this is a reality we see not only in the developing world, but also in the developed world. It's just walking a couple of blocks in Manhattan and we'll see very similar images. And talking about walking, a couple of nights ago I was walking, I think it was 6th Avenue, and I met up with this fantastic painter which I didn't know of. His name is Thomas Hart Benson. And this is a mural of 9 pieces. It's called America Today, and it was painted in 1930. I took this image because it kind of, at least to me, explains briefly how we got here. Because in a way it shows the life cycle, a sort of life cycle for society. This would be production and this would be consumption.